And good afternoon. You're listening to Ken Hudnall. This is the Ken Hudnall Show. Coming to you from our studios right here in exciting El Paso, Texas. Gateway to the Old West and the most haunted city in the country. Well, today's January the 5th day of this new year. Just 360 days remain to the year's over with, and we start a new one. Holidays and observances. National Whipped Cream Day. Top off desserts with a dollop of creamy indulgence. National Keto Day, full of delicious recipes and satisfying meals. Keto's a high-fat, low-carb diet, helps shed pounds and improve overall health. National Bird Day. Get out your binoculars to spy these feathered friends in the wild. National Screenwriters Day. They work tirelessly to create engaging characters and compelling plots that leave viewers talking long after the credits roll. National Thank God It's Monday Day. 12th night. Weigh-in Day. After all those festive feasts, it's time to shed those extra pounds. National Day of Dialogue. Hansel Monday. Now, for those who are not familiar with Hansel Monday, brings a burst of warmth to the year's start in Scotland. In Scotland, this day is marked a special moment when people exchange small gifts. These tokens, often coins or simple items, are given to children and workers and neighbors. Now, the act wasn't about the value of the item, but the gesture itself, aiming to spread good fortune. Even today, some believe that getting a coin on this day ensures prosperity for the months ahead. And quite frankly, anything that has the possibility is worth following up on. Well, it's Zagreb Advent, Christmas Bird Count Week, Artes Mundi, Diet Resolution Week, National Silent Record Week, famous people born on this date: Marilyn Manson, Diane Keaton, January Jones, Robert Duvall, and Bradley Cooper. Well, all that having been said, let's see what stories we have in the news. The big news, of course, is what happened on Saturday when members of Delta Force went into Venezuela and brought out Maduro and his wife. And President Trump also predicts that Cuba's ready to fall after the U.S. captures Venezuela's Maduro. Late on Sunday evening, he predicted Cuba's ready to fall after U.S. forces captured Venezuelan leader Nicolas Maduro, warning that Havana can no longer rely on Caracas for security and oil. Trump said Cuba's fate's now directly tied to Maduro's ouster and the collapse of Venezuela's ability to bankroll allies in that region. Asked if he was considering U.S. action in Cuba, Trump said, I think it's going to fall. I don't think we need any action. I think it's going to go down. President's comments during a press gaggle with reporters aboard Air Force One came after Saturday's capture of Maduro and his wife on charges tied to a narco-terrorism conspiracy. The audacious operation sent shockwaves through allied governments in the region. Cuban officials calling for rallies in support of Venezuela and accusing the U.S. of violating sovereignty. And as you might guess, the liberal left is absolutely losing its tiny little mind that President Trump authorized the capture of Maduro and his wife. Anything on the left is wonderful, and anything on the right is evil, according to the Democrats. We'll have to see what happens in court. Well, captured Venezuelan dictator Maduro faces New York federal judge after a dramatic palace raid. There was an interesting picture I saw on Saturday of a half a dozen Delta Force operatives standing around Maduro's bed, looking at the picture was taken from his point of view. And that would be something that will definitely be life-changing if you woke up and saw them hovering around your bed. Now, Maduro is being indicted on major drug trafficking and weapons charges in the U.S. He's expected in federal court in New York today for his arraignment. The hearing in which Maduro will be formally told the charges against him is set for noon. His wife, Celia Flores, was arrested in the raid and is also due in court. Like her husband, she was a high-level official in the Venezuelan socialist regime. He faces 4 charges: narco-terrorism conspiracy, cocaine importation conspiracy, possession of machine guns and destructive devices, and conspiracy to possess machine guns and destructive devices. According to federal prosecutors, in a superseding indictment unveiled over the weekend, for over 25 years, leaders of Venezuela have abused their position of public trust and corrupted once legitimate institutions to import tons of cocaine into the U.S. Well, Flores faces 3 counts herself: cocaine importation conspiracy, possession of machine guns, destructive devices, and conspiracy to possess machine guns and destructive devices. You know, these type of proceedings are usually very short. There won't be any witness testimony. The defendants will have a chance to enter their pleas, and judges set the next court date and address the subject of pretrial release. Now, bail in this particular situation is highly unlikely, though. Well, Marco Rubio clashes with George Stephanopoulos on Venezuela leadership in a heated exchange. Marco Rubio, of course, is Secretary of State, sparred with ABC's George Stephanopoulos on Sunday as this week host repeatedly pressed Rubio over whether the U.S. is going to actually run Venezuela. After extracting Venezuelan dictator Nicolas Maduro on Saturday, President Trump said during a press conference the U.S. was now going to run the country till there can be a safe transition of power. Well, Stephanopoulos asked Rubio what authority the U.S. had to run Venezuela. Well, Stephanopoulos, being a dyed-in-the-world leftist, of course, is extremely pro-Maduro. Well, former hostage negotiator says he doesn't see Maduro as a bloodthirsty drug dealer. Former special envoy for hostage affairs Roger Carstens told CBS 60 Minutes he doesn't necessarily consider Venezuelan dictator Nicolas Maduro a bloodthirsty drug dealer, despite Trump administration's image of the man. Carsten, who previously served under former President Joe Biden, well, that's definitely something that's going to go at the top of your resume. And the first Trump administration told the news program he wasn't shocked at the news that Maduro had been captured by the U.S. military forces on Saturday. Host Scott Pelley asked Carstens whether he agreed with the current Trump administration's violent depiction of Maduro. He says, "I don't think so, and yet, let me answer that by this way. One way, I'd say I'm not naive to the crimes that were committed by the regime writ large. And if you're president of a country, you, of course, have responsibility for this being what's happening in your government. On the other side, I'd say that being the person in the room with President Maduro, my job was to get Americans back, and that's best done by building a very human relationship. In doing so, I didn't find him to be a bloodthirsty maniac. I found him to be a practical person, somebody who wanted to find ways to solve the problem that were faced by the country." You know, it's interesting how folks react in this country to Venezuela. My wife was banned from Facebook because she has friends in Venezuela. They had sent her pictures of some of the atrocities, and she sent them to her friends, and Facebook just lost its tiny little mind. I was banned from Facebook for not being liberal enough, according to what they said. I actually used the word alien, and not in a positive fashion, because I was talking about aliens from space, not aliens from across the border. That didn't matter to them. Well, the Supreme Court's 2026 rulings could define America for decades to come. As the Supreme Court heads into the new year, its docket makes clear the justices are easing into a quiet second half of the term. this winter we're going to get hearings in a series of cases that go to the core of federalism, equal protection, executive power, and even the meaning of citizenship itself. And looming over and behind the argument calendar is the anticipation of major options and major opinions, some likely to arrive well before the traditional end of the June finale that will shape the legal and political landscape for years to come. The January calendar opens up with Chevron versus Palcremines Parish, a case the court should use to put a overdue stop to the abuse of state tort laws, a weapon against nationally significant industries. At issue is whether energy companies sued by Louisiana parishes over decades-old oil and gas activity may remove those cases to federal court. That question may sound technical, but the stakes couldn't be higher. We'll see what the court decides. Well, helicopter crash in remote Arizona Canyon killed a local man and his 3 nieces on his wedding day after the aircraft apparently struck a slack line strung across the terrain, according to authorities. Fox 10 in Phoenix reported that the victims of the crash that happened Friday were identified by family members. The crash happened near Superior in Pinal County, east of the Phoenix area, shortly after the helicopter took off from Pegasus Airport. All 4 people on board were killed when the aircraft plunged into the canyon floor. Family members said the pilot was David McCarty, a Queen Creek man originally from Oregon who was flying his nieces, Caitlin Heidemann and sisters Rachel and Faith McCarty, all in their early 20s, to see the sights before his wedding ceremony. Eyewitnesses told family members saw the helicopter blades detach moments before it plunged to the canyon floor. The relative said McCarty was a very experienced pilot that owned multiple helicopters and had flown the canyon numerous times without an incident. Adding the short flight was meant to be a joyful outing ahead of what was supposed to be a celebratory day. Family had lost 50% of their children on that wedding day, which is supposed to be a celebration. Extremely tough. Nobody ever anticipates this sort of thing to happen. It's just heart-wrenching. Well, Minnesota fraud cases are still in the news. And the cases are being explained, how hundreds of millions allegedly slipped through state programs. Now, here's what we know so far as Minnesota and the administration of Democratic Governor Tim Walz continue to grapple with the burgeoning fraud scandal that's metastasized into a series of different costly alleged money laundering operations, at times tied to the Somali community in the Twin Cities. With so many moving parts, this following discussion will present a summary of what's transpired so far in terms of each branch of alleged scandal in Minnesota since the stories first made the front page news a month ago. Upward of $1 billion has been lost collectively, with some monies in one respect being remitted overseas and potentially into the hands of Islamic terrorists. For his part, Walz eventually took responsibility for a state safety net allegedly being built out of millions, saying in December, "This is on my watch. I'm accountable for this, and more importantly, I'm the one to fix it." He said his administration has been taking action to stop some suspected fraudulent payments over the summer, and his office referred some for prosecution. Well, one of the major programs was called Feeding Our Future. In mid-December, the Justice Department announced that at least 78 people have been charged in what became dubbed the Feeding Our Future scandal. So named because the Somali-linked nonprofit whose alleged bilking of St. Paul's and Washington coffers brought the case to the forefront. Nearly 40 people had by that point pleaded guilty. And there's a number of other programs to include learning centers, or leering centers, as it says on the side of the building. Well, the Ravens' season has ended in heartbreak as a missed field goal sends the Steelers to the playoffs. Well, you can't win every year. The Critics' Choice Awards are 2026. Ellie Larder, Ellie Fanning, Alicia Silverstone stun on the rainy red carpet. Allie Larter, of course, is the Landman actress. Turned heads Sunday while walking the red carpet on the 31st Annual Critics' Choice Awards. She was 49, slipped into a black silk gown ahead of the show at Barker Hangar in Santa Monica, California. Alicia Silverstone rocked a strapless, sparkling Stella McCartney dress. Nominated for Best Supporting Actress in Sentimental Value, Ellie Fanning hit the red carpet wearing a shimmering gold Ralph Lauren dress. Yes, they're all going to strut and point out how wonderful they are while they get awarded. Well, major airlines expanded passenger test that holds flights to help prevent misconnections. American Airlines continuing to test an AI-powered system designed to delay departing flights so that passengers have a better chance of making their connections. Airline announced back in May of 2025 technology will be tested at the Dallas-Fort Worth hub. Since been expanded to additional airports, including Los Angeles International, Charlotte Douglas International, Miami International, Chicago O'Hare International, Philadelphia International, and the Phoenix Sky Harbor International Airports. For travelers, assuming that it works, the changes can mean fewer misconnections in some cases. The system analyzes real-time data to identify flights that have passengers at risk of missing their next departure and determines whether holding the flight briefly could help those travelers make their connections. Well, President Trump and Elon Musk share a lovely dinner at Mar-a-Lago after public feuding. They appear to have repaired their once strained relationship, according to a post shared by the billionaire Tesla founder on X. In a post shared Sunday, Musk wrote, "Had a lovely dinner last night with POTUS and FLOTUS for adding 2026 is going to be amazing." Well, we'll see. Well, the UK has confirmed joint airstrikes targeting suspected ISIS weapons facility in Syria. British and French warplanes struck an underground facility believed to have been used by Islamic State militants to store weapons and explosives, according to the UK Ministry of Defense. Strike took place Saturday evening in a mountainous region north of Palmyra in Syria's Homs province. In a statement, the Ministry of Defense said Royal Air Force Typhoon FGR-4 fighter jets, supported by a Voyager fueling tanker, operated with French aircraft to strike access tunnels leading to the underground site. Paveway 4 precision-guided bombs are used in the operation. Yes, war has moved into the future, folks. Well, an American has been jailed for billionaire Monaco's death. Plot to kill the wife exposed in a long con. Tim Mayer was convicted of setting a 1999 Monaco penthouse fire that killed billionaire Edmond Safra, and his criminal story doesn't end there. From stage heroics and shifting identities to a later murder-for-hire plot against his own wife, a crime expert says Mayer's long arc offers rare insight into how certain offenders escalate rather than reform. According to former FBI Special Agent Jason Pack, Mayer's behavior reflects a recognizable pattern among offenders who manufacture crisis, seek control, and continue deceiving long after their first crime is exposed. Mayer is an American who claimed he had been a Green Beret who was a private nurse hired to care for Safra when the fire broke out inside Safra's heavily secured Monaco penthouse in early hours of December 3rd, 1999. Safra and another nurse, Vivian Torrenta, died of smoke inhalation after locking themselves inside a bathroom believed to double as a safe room. Well, it turned out to be not as safe as they thought it was. Well, Jack Ryan, co-creator, surprised by parallels between the series and Venezuelan strikes. Carlton Cruz, co-creator of Amazon's Jack Ryan series, remarked about the surprising parallels between his show and recent U.S. strikes in Venezuela. Clips from season 2 of that series began trending on social media over the weekend, featuring protagonist Jack Ryan, played by John Krasinski, explaining Venezuela's political turmoil. According to what Ryan said, the fact is that Venezuela is arguably the single greatest source of oil and minerals on the planet. So why is this country in the midst of one of the greatest humanitarian crises in modern history? Went on to explain the political ruin came from the country's fictional leader, Nicholas Reyes, whom Ryan described as having crippled the economy by half and raised the poverty level to almost 400%. Well, sometimes fiction does follow fact. Well, Dan Bongino officially leaves the FBI deputy director role after less than a year, going back to civilian life. He said on X that Saturday was his last day on the job before he'd return to civilian life. He said it's been an incredible year thanks to the leadership and decisiveness of President Trump. The honor of a lifetime to work with Director Patel and to serve you, the American people. See you on the other side. Well, the former FBI deputy director announced in mid-December he'd be leaving his role at the Bureau at the start of the new year. President Trump, for his part, previously praised Bongino, who assumed office in March, for his work at the FBI. He said, Dan did a great job, but I think he wants to go back to his show. And let me tell you, doing a podcast is certainly an interesting way to do things. Well, I don't know what has me sneezing this morning. Well, President Trump's new tax credit plan is, according to experts, going to give us over 1,000 ways to boost educational freedom. It's going to be a watershed year for educational policy in the U.S. It'll be the year that will be known a decade and beyond as when the signature of federal education policy in this era took shape. For the news coverage, you might assume we're talking about the elimination of the U.S. Department of Education. But that's not the case. Despite all the noise and fury around eliminating the Department of Education, what is actually the signature policy of this time and the key achievement of the administration and Congress is the newly enacted federal tax credit scholarship program. Every taxpayer that owes federal taxes in America will be able to make a choice, starting in 2027. Either send $1,700 in taxes to the swamp to do whatever it is they want to do with it, or donate $1,700 to a nonprofit scholarship granting organization that in turn will give out 90% of those funds to students and families earning less than 300% of the area median income for scholarships to fund all kinds of educational programming. And maybe it will work. We'll find out shortly. Well, according to Gordon Sondland, Trump's real politic may be the only way to end the Ukraine war. For 3 years, the Washington foreign policy establishment insisted on the one acceptable outcome in Ukraine. Total victory over Russia achieved through relentless military aid, indefinite financial support, and escalation readiness regardless of the risk. But actually, strategy and morality are not always the same thing. Real leadership demands confronting reality as it exists, not as we want it to be. We'll see what 2026 brings us in that war. Well, Grey's Anatomy actor Stephen Bailey breaks silence on a rare neuromuscular disorder diagnosis he's received. Been diagnosed, and he discussed it in an open letter he posted in a thread on X. This 54-year-old actor who played Joe, the owner of the fictional Emerald City bar frequented by the hit show's main characters during season 1 through 7, shared he's battling congenital myasthenic syndrome, or CMS, after being diagnosed more than 5 years ago. He said, I spent years being cautious, private, and quiet about something that's been shaping my life and my work. That time's over. I'm going to talk about it now. Well, having finished the news segment, let's go talk about our topic for today. There are a lot of people that I've heard holding forth on what they're calling the real Da Vinci Code. They claim that Leonardo da Vinci predicted an apocalypse. There's a lot of people who believe that the secrets of the future are actually found in the work of Leonardo da Vinci. He's considered by many scholars to be the greatest painter of all time. He produced both the Mona Lisa and the Last Supper. And he was actually the ultimate Renaissance man. He was an artist, a botanist, an architect, a scientist, a mathematician, a writer, musician. And frankly, you name it, he did it. And he did it at a level that boggles the mind. As an inventor, he accurately predicted hundreds of advancements in science, transportation, medicine, and warfare. And he did that 500 years before any of them came to pass. Some call it human genius, but a few think he actually saw the future. And a lot of folks now believe that Da Vinci's most dangerous prophecy is yet to be unlocked. Da Vinci drawing that was hidden for centuries may prove to be the final piece of his most important prophecy. Now, this man was born out of wedlock in 1452 to a wealthy notary father and a peasant woman. Da Vinci was just 14 years old when he had his first painting apprenticeship with Renaissance master Andrea del Verrocchio. According to the story, one of his first big opportunities was to paint an angel in the great masterwork, the Baptism of Christ. After looking at it, Verrocchio allegedly vowed he'd never paint again in order to live up to his young student Leonardo da Vinci. Now, there's no question, if you're honest, that Leonardo da Vinci was the very definition of a Renaissance man. But the question becomes, was he a prophet? Man who foresaw our own world and the potential disasters facing it in precise, specific detail. And did he foresee them 500 years ago? I mean, there's a lot of folks that say that's absolutely impossible. And yet that possibility is exactly what a small group of people are claiming. And their claims are based on a single page from one of the most mysterious of all Da Vinci works, the Codex Atlanticus. Now, hidden for centuries, this page may be the most important clue to Da Vinci's secret beliefs and maybe to his prophecies. Now, before we start discussing the Codex Atlanticus, you need to know what a codex is. Very simply put, it's a collection of ancient works. In that context, the Codex Atlanticus is essentially Da Vinci's brain on paper. Throughout his life, whatever specific project he's working on, he was constantly making notes, filling thousands of loose pages, as well as the pages of notebooks with every idea he came up with every observation he made. These working notebooks and papers were the catch-alls of his ideas and visions. Now, had the pages of his notes and all the sketches he made been left in his studio, they might have been scattered and lost to history. But they weren't left loose. After his death, his personal journals and sketches and philosophies and inventions are gathered by admirers and bound into volumes, such a volumes is called a codex. And Da Vinci's codexes are among the, or the codices, I guess it is among the most valuable in all of history. So you might ask yourself, how valuable could they be? One of the lesser codices, known as the Codex Leicester, focusing primarily on Da Vinci's and later scientific writings and notations and containing only 72 pages, was purchased in 1994 for $30 million. The buyer? Mr. Microsoft himself, Bill Gates. Well, far greater than the Codex Leicester, though, is the set of volumes known as the Codex Atlanticus. More than 1,000 pages of Da Vinci's brilliance and insight bound into 12 volumes. Conservative estimates place the value on these volumes at more than $700 million. And of those pages, one stands out as strikingly provocative, even among Da Vinci's works. Page 1033 of the Codex Atlanticus. To many, it's the most wildly apocalyptic work Da Vinci ever created. A stark vision of the end of the world and the death of humanity. But to a few people, page 1033 doesn't just describe the apocalypse, it actually predicts it. In the Codex Atlanticus, one of the things most interesting about page 1033 is what's missing. Not missing from the page's content, but from a pride of place position affixed to it. At some point in history, something on page 1033 was removed. Many folks thought it was lost to history. Nobody knew who took it. Nobody knew what happened to it. Nobody knew exactly what was actually missing. But an unexpected discovery showed the path that the missing piece had followed for at least the last 100 years or so. The part turned out to be nothing less than the earliest known self-portrait of Da Vinci himself. Came in the possession of Cardinal Placido Maria Tadini, Archbishop of Genoa, a man who numbered among his responsibilities the suppression of potential rebellions against religion. For reasons unknown, Cardinal Tadini hid the drawing, placing it within the cover of an otherwise undistinguished book. Now, he died in 1847 in his house, and possessions were sold at auction. And the new owners settled into the cardinal's house, and if they ever examined the ancient book, they didn't examine it very closely. It wasn't until 1940, when a descendant of the owners moved into new quarters, that the house's contents were also moved. Somebody finally noticed something unusual about that book. Looking closely at that volume, the new owner discovered the drawing hidden inside it. But the question becomes, did he realize that this drawing was actually drawn by Da Vinci himself? Clearly he didn't, but he had taste, and finding the drawing attractive, the new owner framed it and hung it on a wall, and remained in that position for decades until it was noticed by art collector Christina Gerbino's family friend. And an antiques restorer felt he'd spotted something exceptional, maybe even more than that. After some scientific and historical testing, Gerbino realized this was indeed the work of Leonardo da Vinci. And the drawing's dimensions perfectly matched those of the missing part of the Codex Atlanticus. And the paper and the ink were of the sort da Vinci used. Even the glue could be matched to the spine of the book. And the signature bottom? Well, we were lucky enough to have Gerbino make a discussion of that page. So this is a picture, put up what was said to be a picture in the lower part of the drawing. And if you read that signature from left to right, we've got two letters that are very clear. E and O. Now that's myself in Italian. Then there are four letters together, N-A-R-D and O-D-A. That's Leonardo da Vinci, myself, literally translated. It's a signature. Then you look at the signature from the right side to the left side, and the interpretation is, if we translate it into English, it says, I'm this way, I do this myself. Well, the fact that the signature reads backwards is a telltale sign that we're likely looking at a real Da Vinci. He wrote almost all his personal letters in mirror writing. The sentences have to be read from right to left rather than left to right. And some say that was because he was left-handed and he simply knew when to smudge the ink. Others say it was so lesser artists wouldn't copy his masterworks. Well, a lot of folks believe it was to hide ideas that might have gotten him in trouble with the church, with the government, the law, or the church. See, in Da Vinci's time, dissecting anything more than a pig was strictly forbidden. But he performed clandestine dissections of humans and created highly detailed anatomical diagrams and writings, all in mirror writing. As a matter of fact, even the mirror version of his own signature contains a coded message. Read one way, the signature is his name, Leonardo, but by focusing on individual letters and combinations of letters that make up his name, you can also translate the reverse signature as saying, in this way, I do this myself. Well, it doesn't sound too provocative, but keep in mind this was the 1400s. This was a time when self-reliance and putting human reason first were considered a threat to the church. And the church was always supposed to come first, and humans were just its obedient servants. So between chopping up human corpses and the idea that the human body might be a marvel of science and not of God, these were two things that may have put Da Vinci on a short list of people to keep a close, watchful, and potentially suppressive eye on. And to see how hard mirror writing is, try it yourself. Try writing your first name backward, forming the letters as they are normally formed. It's not impossible. It's just difficult. Now try writing your name backward or reversing the direction in which the letters face. See what that result should look like. Write your name the normal way and then hold that page up to the mirror. That reflection will show you what you're going to try to recreate. Now, if your name is something simple like Otto, you got it made. But if it's a little more complex, you're going to have issues. Well, if you want to see what kind of things Da Vinci was getting up to, let's talk about some of the inventions, devices Da Vinci envisioned and captured in extraordinary detail on paper. Number one was a flying machine. Number two was a helicopter. How about a tank, a submarine, scuba gear, a machine gun, even something as exotic as a parachute? Now, in 1493, Da Vinci made a design for a helicopter, more than 400 years before the Wright brothers were ever thought about. And the fact that most of these devices were impractical in the 15th century doesn't really matter. So with all that, ask yourself this: why is page 1033 of the Codex Atlanticus so special? Well, according to Gerbino, that page talks about prophecies. Only page in the entire codex that mentions a prophecy. And something on that one page was removed and hidden by the cardinal. Many people believe page 1033 is Da Vinci trying to tell the world something about his future. And let's not make a mistake here, folks. His predictions are grim. He writes of entire forests being destroyed and the weapons of mass destruction. He talks about the extinction of species and the slaughter of man. One of his recurring themes is destruction by water, a flood, or a tidal wave. Now, by now, Da Vinci scholars have scanned every inch of page 1033, trying to make sense of the prophecy and trying to figure out what the missing piece is. So the idea that this drawing may not only be a Da Vinci, but the missing piece and part of the prophecy is a huge discovery. And considering a cardinal believed something about this drawing was so important, he felt it needed to be hidden carefully. That brings up the biggest question of all. What was history's greatest mind trying to tell us? Now, there's no question Da Vinci was a genius, but he was a controversial genius. In an age when Europeans were put to death for dissecting cadavers, he was the guy that secretly performed more than 30 human dissections. So why would he be willing to risk his life? Why would he be willing to do it? Well, during his time, when anatomy was studied, the lessons taught were based on ancient Greek and Roman texts, particularly those of Galen, 130 to 200 AD. And his predecessor, Hippocrates, and Galen's knowledge and insights were 13 centuries old and astonishingly inaccurate, containing errors and misunderstandings of the workings of the body and even placement of the organs. And further compounding that problem was the requirement that when dissection was available to medical students, they were examining animals, generally pigs. Well, to Da Vinci, the very idea was ridiculous. Indeed, he was fascinated with the human anatomy. Using only the crude instruments of his time, he dissected and drew the different parts of the brain, made major breakthroughs in our understanding of the backbone. In fact, in 2005, Francis Wells developed a revolutionary technology to repair damaged hearts that was based on Da Vinci's diagrams from 500 years ago. Despite the greatest advancements in medicine, the church was opposed to dissecting cadavers. You might ask yourself why. In Italy in the 1400s, the Catholic Church was more powerful than the government, and the church was deeply committed to protecting that power. Revolutionary ideas and insights into science could easily threaten the institution, and some were thus forbidden or suppressed. Well, amazingly enough, his work also changed the course of comic books in the 20th century. When Bill Finger and Bob Kane were creating their new superhero in the 1930s, they looked at Da Vinci's design for his ornithopter flying device and took it as inspiration for the winged look of their character's cape. And the character they were trying to create? Batman. Without Da Vinci, there wouldn't have been a Batman, which is interesting to consider. Well, why did Carter Cadini hide his part of page 1033 of the Codex Atlanticus? Well, Father Norman Tanner in Italy was asked that question. He was asked, could the self-portrait have contained hidden meanings or symbols? And he responded, throughout the medieval period, there was a lot of interest in the occult and prophecy and so on, so that was quite standard. They also liked writing in secret language and so on. That was just part of life. So did that mean the sketch could contain messages about our future? And Tanner responded, it's possible. They really liked this kind of playful hiding and a certain amount of secrecy within paintings. In the end, though, according to Father Tanner, the church eventually embraced Da Vinci and much of his work, even if they didn't understand him. So the question remains, why would Da Vinci place a self-portrait among his most cryptic prophecies? Well, according to Mona Lisa expert Marina Wallace, Da Vinci's Codex Atlanticus contained considerations about how one should behave and how one should expect things to be. They're kind of ways of deep thought using very clever wording. It wasn't the only place he had certain meanings. During his life, Da Vinci thought a lot about the future, and we know he was obsessed with water. When he died, he was preparing what many believe would have been his last masterpiece. It was going to be called The Great Flood. The sketches show storms so violent they topple mountains. There's great power in the sketches, also great sadness. All the enormous artistic talent and the skill of Leonardo da Vinci are here. But there's also a weariness, perhaps even despair. Some experts said they spotted Da Vinci's own self-portrait in the art. A lot of folks say they can't see it, and others say they can, so take a look for yourself. But what would another mysterious self-portrait mean? When he describes the flood, the deluge, with incredible words, it's very descriptive, very evocative. And the drawings are very detailed in their specific drawings. Look at the destruction that such a natural event could bring. So he's pointing to the fact that these are the things our human nature is going to be subjected to during our lifetime. And if you want to extend that to a lifetime of all the ones that come after us, certainly you can say that there's a warning to ourselves as part of nature. But of all the details Wallace shared with us, the most intriguing was simply this. When Da Vinci was traveling, he took the Mona Lisa with him wherever he went. Like to have it with him. Now, we all know about the Mona Lisa, of course. Its seemingly simple image is possibly the most widely recognized and studied piece of art in the history of the world. Estimated to be worth more than $700 million. But now here's an interesting question. Could there be more to this painting than meets the eye? And that just isn't the plot of a novel. Could the Mona Lisa be the key to crack the code that spans Da Vinci's life work? According to Wallace, when you look closely at the Mona Lisa, there's actually water in the background of the painting. Looks like a beautiful nature scene. But if you look even closer, that water's clearly higher on one side than on the other, so a flood is inevitable. And if you pull the Mona Lisa out of the painting, the water comes crashing together. The only thing stopping that flood is the figure, alleged by some to be a self-portrait. So at this point, I have to ask, and could the Mona Lisa be part of a larger story, Da Vinci's story of the end of the world? When that question was asked of art historian Silvano Vicetti, he explained that in the left eye of Mona Lisa, there's the letter S. In the right eye, there's the letter L. In the background of the painting, underneath the arch, there's the number 72. During this period of the Renaissance, geometric symbols and numbers were very important. If you're investigating signs and symbols, the numbers 7 and 2 come up time and time again. But in Leonardo's case, many of the secret codes are more personal. For some reason not fully understood, he was obsessed with the number 7 and 2, as well as their combined forms of 27 and 72, and hid them in many works, including two of his most famous. Stone bridge on the Mona Lisa's background contains the number 72. And there's 72 panels in the ceiling above the gathering of the Last Supper. And there's more to 72 than the number 7 and 2. There's more to Leonardo's use of them than their presence in the Mona Lisa and the Last Supper. Among other things, Da Vinci designed a unique geometric shape that has 72 sides. And he designed his famous Vitruvian Man drawing around the basis of 27 and 72 degree angles. So you might ask yourself why he used these particular numbers. And that's because they have biblical connections. According to Bassetti, the number 27 refers to the book of Revelation. The book is the 27th book in the New Testament, in which the author describes a series of violent events that were to occur at the end of the world. The number 72 is also a biblical reference. It refers to the number of races that survived Noah's Ark. The number 72 doesn't just relate to an apocalyptic story, but to a story describing a worldwide flood. So as you can see, there's something of a theme here. Prophecies, apocalypse, the end of the world. In Mona Lisa, we see Da Vinci's potential warning about the power of nature and dangers of floods. And even better, Da Vinci is known to have copied flood-related passages from the Bible and kept them in his workrooms and studios. And in addition, remember, what would have been Da Vinci's greatest last painting? The Great Flood. Well, according to Bruce Edelstein, a professor at NYU in Florence, Leonardo not only made many drawings of water and included a representation of water in aqueous bodies in many of his paintings, he also wrote about water in the Codex Atlanticus itself. And they were talking about flooding, the dangers of flooding, and how conscious Leonardo would have been of that. One of the things he wrote in the Codex Atlanticus was the swollen rivers overflow and submerge the wide lowlands and its inhabitants. Sounds like some great mystery, some great apocalyptic happening that Leonardo's foretelling. Actually, according to Vassetti, the genius of Leonardo's, he was able to put all that he learned inside his paintings and put messages in there that speak to us over the ages. So, there's some hidden meanings in Da Vinci's art, and it's clear that Da Vinci had an obsession with water, tidal waves, and floods. Still doesn't answer the key question that we've been talking about, the so-called prophecy in the Codex Atlanticus. In this work, was Da Vinci predicting a specific event we can prepare for, or was he simply observing the cycles of nature? Well, most folks will agree that Da Vinci was a genius. But was he using his art to actually make prophecies about the future? Some do try to draw connections, and it's easy to start threading things together when you start pulling apart his secrets. And well, until we met Da Vinci scholar Marco Levi, that we found what may be the real answer. Levi was asked about Leonardo being a prophet, and there's no question about that. He was a visionary. But if you ask me if he was able to predict what was going to happen, a certain disaster on a certain day, the answer to that would be no. He was a scientist who was trying to comprehend, to give an order to these things. And like all the geniuses we've had, Oppenheimer and Einstein and others, were not thinking about how to destroy the world. They were thinking about how to give us something new, better for our future. So it depends on how you use the things you have. And that's perhaps Da Vinci's most profound prediction of all. Think back to those different interpretations of the Mona Lisa. Sits in the midst of nature, just as we sit in the midst of nature. Will we sit there serenely, as the female figure in that painting is doing? We'll be crushed by nature's coming devastation. It depends on what you're looking for and how you choose to act in this world. During his lifetime, Da Vinci pursued innovations in medicine and engineering that improved health and quality of life. He also designed cutting-edge weapons to help us wage war. When it comes to what we'll face, a calm peace or a riotous battle, the answer so often is simply, depends on what we do. That isn't just Da Vinci speaking to us from beyond the grave, as Buddy Levy pointed out. It's him speaking to us for all time. Well, what sent folks down this path was a newfound portrait by Leonardo da Vinci that came from the so-called Book of Prophecies. Question became, what did that portrait mean? Was it a hint, a clue, a prophecy in itself? It was, because it's Da Vinci himself who's the answer. It's Da Vinci himself who's absolute proof of the world's most beautiful secret, that the future is created by us, by human innovation. So what will that future bring? Depends on how big we're willing to dream. Almost 500 years ago, every single one of Da Vinci's inventions failed. The wings he designed didn't help him fly. The scuba gear he designed was made from a suit of leather. His helicopter never took off, but over time, as human innovation caught up with his ideas, they all worked. It's his ultimate prophecy. Be daring, be daring, be daring. There's no big dream unless you dream big. Well, we're going to turn from discussing the genius that's Leonardo da Vinci and ask a question that I've heard a number of people ask. Is there actually any gold still in Fort Knox? Last time it was allowed inside Fort Knox was 1974 after a congressional call to actually see the gold. A lot of experts today believe that soldiers stationed at Fort Knox protecting absolute nothing. They point to numerous theories to explain their beliefs. Some say that gold was used to make off-the-books purchases. Others say it was used to manipulate the price of the dollar. And a few folks believe it was put to even darker uses, but frankly, nobody knows. But it's interesting to note that nobody's actually seen that gold since 1974. April 3rd, 1933. Only a month and a day after being sworn in for his first term, President Roosevelt executed Executive Order 6012. And with his signature, made it illegal for private citizens to own gold. Cited the crisis from the Great Depression as his reason. So to house all that gold the government came in to obtain, Treasury built a vault at Fort Knox. It soon held more than half the world's known gold, worth over $200 billion at the time. Now, the Kentucky location was chosen because it was landlocked, making it less susceptible to enemy attack. Now, today, Fort Knox remains the most impregnable vault in the world, with 1,000 miles of U.S. territory in every direction. And there's an enormous arsenal present to protect it. And to top it off, the granite foundation is 5 feet thick, and the vault door weighs more than 2.5 tons. But how drastic and dramatic was the action to take gold from the American people? Private ownership of gold became not just illegal, but also punishable with stiff fines and jail terms of up to a decade. While some citizens transferred their gold holdings to banks in Switzerland or other nations, most of the U.S. gold left private hands. Other than small amounts used in dentistry and jewelry, valuable coins held by collectors, and 5 ounces that private citizens were still allowed to own, thousands of tons of gold transferred to the government. So it comes back to a question that's never really been answered. What's really inside Fort Knox? Lawyer and journalist David Gans was there the last time that depository was open for inspection. What he saw is exactly what most of us would expect to see. He said it was utterly amazing. One of the most exciting events I've ever been to. First thing is you're blinded by the light. The room is lined on 3 sides with gold, floor to ceiling. Second thing is a big, overwhelming sense of claustrophobia because of how small the room is. So that brings up another interesting question. All our gold's kept in a small room. It's a vault that's about 8 or 9 feet by 10 feet high and 15 feet deep. But when he was asked if that vault could be empty, his response was, it's absolutely possible. The government could have done it. Only way that anybody's going to find out is to go back to Fort Knox and look inside the vaults. And in fact, unless the vault's open for inspection, there's no way to know. There's no regular schedule for inspecting our gold reserves. No public accounting or anything to produce evidence that the gold is still there. Treasury Department's required to put out on a monthly basis, an asset balance sheet with the U.S. government. It hadn't changed 15 cents over the years. What makes it so concerning is the fact that the price of gold has fluctuated wildly throughout the years, and yet the government says the value of our gold reserves has been almost exactly the same since it was put there. Now, America's economy used to be based on the gold standard, which meant that the dollar bills were really only deeds for a tiny portion of the nation's gold. Now, that changed in 1971, of course, when the government moved to a confidence-based economy. That meant for decades we've relied on the principle of supply and demand, not the dollar's relationship to gold, to set the dollar's value. And since the government controls the supply of gold, it has far more power to control the value of the dollar. And you top that off with the fact that there's no public audits, and you start to wonder, what would happen if Fort Knox is empty? Well, think back to the national threat that caused Fort Knox to be open. The Great Depression. Stock market collapsed. The economy had ground to a halt. A quarter of the nation was without work. Factories were closed. Stores were shuttered. And the lines for soup kitchens and bread lines stretched down the block in every town. These same towns have seen many of their banks fail and depositors rush to withdraw their savings. Withdrawals that vastly exceeded the amount of cash the bank had on hand. And to most people, that was far more terrifying than a plummeting stock market whose losses wiped out the millionaires. Imagine what you would do and think if you went to your bank and found it was boarded up, your life savings vanished. How would you react? You'd have anger, followed by fear, and then comes the panic. Wouldn't be much different today in our confidence-based economy when you take away the confidence. According to Gantz, there'd be panic in the streets, you'd have riots, you'd have financial meltdown, and you could have people taking dollar bills and tearing them up and throwing them up in the air. Well, that might be a bit dramatic, but Gantz is making a vital point about hyperinflation, which is what happens when money literally becomes not worth the paper it's printed on. And frankly, that happens all the time. The Germans saw it in 1923 when firewood cost 850 billion marks. Greece experienced it in 1943 when milk went to 2 million drachmas a liter. And it happened in Brazil in 1993 when a bottle of suntan lotion cost 800,000 cruzeiros reais. Needless to say, the way the world's economies are interconnected, there'd be the potential for a global financial meltdown. And that's definitely at least one motive for why the government wouldn't want you knowing if Fort Knox gold is gone or not. Well, on that note, we've come to the end of today's show. We'll be back tomorrow and talk more about various topics such as the Maduro indictment. More information that's still coming out about the attack on Venezuela. So until tomorrow at this time, this is Ken Hudnall for the Ken Hudnall Show saying have a truly great evening.